young men in particular were more attracted to traditional gender roles and less supportive of gender equality moves.
New research from countries around the world has found a third of Gen Z men, those under 29, agree that a wife ought to obey her husband. A poll conducted by Ipsos and the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's asked 23,000 people in countries including the UK, USA, Brazil, Australia and India about their views on marriage. It found that younger men were much more likely than before to have traditional views about marriage and disagree with gender equality. Julia Gillard is the former Prime Minister of Australia and the chair of the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's Business School. Good morning.
Good morning.
Were you surprised by the results of this poll?
I'd like to say I was surprised, but unfortunately I wasn't. We've been in partnership with Ipsos Mori at the Global Institute for Women's Leadership now for several years, and we were amongst the first to be saying there is a trend line here, particularly amongst young men, going in a bad direction when it comes to gender equality. So whilst we've never asked this question before, the trend line was telling us that young men in particular were more attracted to traditional gender roles and less supportive of gender equality moves.
And why do you think that is? What's driving that forward?
I wish we knew absolutely forensically, and we do want to do more research, but intuitively I think it's a mix of the manosphere, which of course has been much discussed now, the influence of online influencers and their version of masculinity. I think very early access to pornography is part of the picture. I do think we're also looking at the generation of young men that came through school when there were a lot of programs for the girls, and I'm one of the people who was the bringer of those programs, you know, girls in science, girls in leadership. Clearly there was a need to do those programs, but perhaps what we underestimated is that they would cause resentment amongst the boys. And then this is all happening, of course, against a backdrop where it's pretty tough to come of age in this time with the economy as it is and with all of the uncertainties in the world. And we know that young men in particular are the cohort who are most likely to not make a successful transition from school to work or school to further education. Not all young men, we're talking about a subset here, but it's a significant subset, and we do need to be deeply concerned about that.
I'm so interested by what you just said there about the impact of things that were really done to help promote women and leadership for young women who felt that there was a gap there, and there was a gap there. It wasn't just a perceived gap. So what's the answer? Because when we talk about this stuff, often we say, well, look, it's young men, they get into incel culture, they get into these online, worlds with Andrew Tate and others, and really it's their fault. They're bad young men. We should blame them. We should crack down on them. They are the problem. But it sounds like what you're saying is if we do that, it actually might drive this trend even further.
I think that's absolutely right. I think we actually need to do the complete reverse of that. I think slogans like toxic masculinity and all the rest are not serving us at all. I think they're the wrong approach. They have allowed to settle an impression that gender equality is a zero-sum game, that more for women necessarily means less for men. Whereas a more gender equal world would actually be a better world for everyone. It would give everyone more options and more choices. And we can see that in other work that the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's Business School does. We did a gender equality index looking at local government areas in the UK, and that clearly showed that the most gender equal places were also the most socially and economically advanced places. And what that is telling you is that when we rise together. So gender equality is for everyone, and we've got to make sure that men, including young men, are wrapped up into this project.
Is there an element of cultural background to this? Because one of the conversations that's happening in this country at the moment, and it's actually also coming to us from commentators in America, is a suggestion that the fabric of the UK has been changed by immigration, that we've somehow allowed what this country is to be eroded. And it's also been taken up now as a narrative by the Conservative Party, who were talking about having one culture here that is followed by everybody who lives in this country. Is there a cultural element to what you're seeing here?
Well, I'd want to be very clear. There's nothing in our research which deals with that question. We haven't disaggregated results by cultural or ethnic background, so I can't say anything evidence-based. But what I can say intuitively and from my heart is we're talking in gender equality about the negative power of stereotypes, the negative power of stereotypes that tell you what it is to be a man or what it is to be a woman. And I think it would be very odd indeed if we decided that the answer to those negative stereotypes is to embrace more negative stereotyping about what people from particular ethnic or cultural backgrounds are like.
And what do you mean by that? We should disregard, because some cultures do have very bad attitudes towards women.
Well, I think some individuals obviously have bad attitudes towards women, and we should call that out and we should combat that wherever it is. But we shouldn't just presume because someone is from a particular background that they hold a particular view without asking them about it and actually finding out.
Can I ask you, you are obviously one of the most powerful women in the world at one point. We are obviously talking a lot about what's happening in Iran on the programme this morning. Have you been surprised by the current Australian administration's response to Donald Trump's action in Iran? It was pretty full-throated at the start.
I make it a policy now in my post-political life to not be one of those politicians that looms over the shoulder of the current generation with advice about what they should be doing now. So really all I have is very warm wishes towards the Australian government, the Albanese government, a great Labor government, and wish them well as they navigate this very difficult time in the world.
They are, though, almost all, I think pretty much all, men around the table talking about what's happening in Iran at the moment. From the American side, from the Israeli side, this is being led by men. Do you think that matters?
Well, I think we want to see a gender equal world, and a gender equal world would be one in which, at every level of leadership, including leading nation states, you would see around half men, half women doing that leadership. I think we have to be a little bit careful in saying, and if that happened, women would always lead in the following way, be more empathetic, be more nurturing. If we do that, we're in fact cooking in the stereotypes that we're trying to overcome. And we do need to remember that across history, there have been many women leaders who have led at times of war. My argument for gender equality isn't necessarily that women would do it differently or better. It is that if we believe that merit is equally distributed between the sexes, and I do, then that must tell you that there are women of merit who are missing out under current structures because they are channeling through men. I do as well think that, the best kind of leadership is leadership from men or women, which shows strength and empathy, which is very evidence-based and reason-based, and we don't always see that in today's world.
Julia Gillard, thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning.
Lovely to have the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. That is Julia Gillard there, the chair of the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's Business School, and of course the former Prime Minister of Australia.
And I think the anti-stereotype is very important. However, I think the question you followed up with her is important. When you look at Iran, for example, Orthodox Islamic societies have at the heart that men should rule them. It's true of the Taliban in Afghanistan. It's true of Saudi Arabia. It's true of Iran. If you look at any decision-making process in those countries, it's not like there's 95% men and a woman. There's no women. Yeah. Women aren't trusted to do that. And Kelly Badenoch's point, which I think I probably agree with, is some cultures are objectively better than others if you look at it through a certain prism. If you want to look through the prism of gender equality, Western cultures are better than Orthodox Islamic cultures when it comes to gender equality. I just think that's just an objective fact.
Although that isn't quite what they said. They said some cultures are better than others, full stop.
Yeah, but
I think if you're talking about a specific thing, then you can make an argument for that. But I think broadly it's a different question.
I think the argument though is makes itself. I mean, if you look at when they're trying to elect the new Ayatollah, how many women are in when they're talking about? Can you get a female Ayatollah? No, you can't.
No.
It's because the entire religious and cultural structure is built around a certain view that women should keep quiet and men should make the decisions. That's just the reality of it.